Hey guys, Ponce here to talk to you guys about some potential balance changes to Teamfight Tactics, which may be coming next Wednesday. So that's July the 24th. The not a bi-weekly patch, but like a patch after the week of the big patch. So this won't be quite as large in scope theoretically. I'm just looking at a preview here posted by a Riot employee, I believe Riot Mort. So this is available on Twitter. I'll link to that below the description so you can check out this for yourself. Note it says tentative patch changes, so this might not actually go through exactly as is. It might not go through at all. Some of it might go through, who knows. But yeah, let's just take a quick look here, see the likelihood of all this stuff, what I think of it, and then we'll move on with our lives. Alright, first off we have the buff section, starting with Ari. That makes sense to me. She's just kind of exists. She's one of those characters that has kind of filled a place of, if you're doing Wild Sork, she's a Wild Sork, put her in there, you know. Generally, it seems like characters like that, who are just there as buff sticks, essentially, have slowly been getting buffed so that they're characters in their own right. So, yeah, we'll see what happens with that. It makes sense to me that Ari's going to get buffed. Although, I don't know, in conjunction with the Wild buff here you see over here, whatever that may be, she might start becoming a really strong pick, or like Wild might become extra popular. But the Wild comps have started to die off a bit, given that other things are buffed up. So yeah, could be interesting to see what happens there. All right, moving right along, we got Mordekaiser. It makes total sense. Another like character who just seems to exist purely to get another comp going. He doesn't really seem to offer much in his own right, so he's good for making a Phantom. He's just like, he's the other Phantom. Or, you know, if you happen to be doing a knight heavy comp, he's a knight that fills the slot. There you go. Poppy isn't exactly like that. She's actually not too bad in her own right since the buff, so they're buffing her again. I mean, I don't disagree with the buff personally. It's just not what I would have in my mind. Wouldn't go to Poppy necessarily like first for as a character to buff kind of thing. But I don't necessarily horribly disagree with it either. She's, again, still just kind of there. She's nice in a Yordle comp. I know, she fills a slot in a Knight comp. So, I don't really have tons of thoughts on this. But, yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens if she gets buffed. Alright, Morellonomicons. This, in an odd sort of way, makes sense a bit. It's a strong item, I think, but it's really, it serves a similar function to Red Buff, and Red Buff completely overshadows it right now. So it's interesting they're going the route of buffing this instead of like maybe nerfing Red Buff if they want those items to be of kind of like an equal stature, but one is attack, the other is spell. I mean, I suppose it's somewhat telling that, yeah, I don't really build Morellonomicons. I don't see too many other people build it. I guess it's a little bit hard to use in general. So we'll see what happens to that. Of note, I feel, is if they make this item really strong in conjunction with also a very, very strong red buff, that is very oppressive against anything involving healing. I've noticed, since everyone's just spamming red buff now, at least in my games, it's very difficult to use anything involving healing. So Redemption, Swain, anything with lifesteal. So like even stuff like Elise is just crappier. So yeah, we'll see what happens to that. Sork being buffed. I don't actually understand that personally. Maybe they want it to shut down or counteract sort of brawlers, which are becoming more and more popular. Sorcerers seem fine to me. To single them out specifically for a buff indicates to me that Riot thinks they're weak. I mean, there's certainly probably, yeah, I'm definitely seeing a lot less of them since the patch. Is that necessarily an indication that they're too weak, or that there's better options? Again, I suppose it depends on the scope of the buff here. And I guess they kind of get torn apart a bit earlier with more aggro play, with people kind of pushing a lot more damage a lot more early, and they just sort of get run through. So maybe that's what they're looking to do. Maybe just make them a bit less kind of vulnerable early on. Could be a thing. Wild, similar situation to Sork. I wouldn't necessarily have thought to myself, Wild needs a buff right now. But at the same time, I'm also seeing a lot less... Well, no, I'm not actually necessarily seeing a lot less Wild. I'm not actually totally certain of the reasoning there. If they get a small buff, they probably make them out of line. They're definitely not on my radar as being crazy overpowered or anything at the moment. So, there you have it. Alright, nerfs. Tristana. I mean, she's very good in the comps. For a tier 1, I guess she's very, very good in the comps that she ultimately ends up going into. Either some kind of Yordle line, especially to be like Yordle Gunner, or just straight up Gunner of some description. She tends to stick around quite strongly, now that I think of it, in kind of any sort of comp. Like, she'll actually make it to tier 3 and just sort of stay there. If you're running a Gunner comp a lot of the time, I'm thinking, yeah, Lucian's just the one that gets replaced by an MF or something, or if you have really strong Graves. Although I do like Lucian if you can actually level him, but, by virtue of being slightly more rare, maybe sometimes he doesn't. A little bit weird to me that she's being singled out, but at the same time, yeah, she is a tier 1, so I guess that's probably the consideration there. Alright, Volibear makes total sense, probably the thing that makes the most sense we're seeing so far. It's kind of been teamfight Volibear for a little bit now. He's really good. I don't know why they buffed him as hard as they did. So yeah, he's going to get nerfed. Not a lot to say about that. Nerf Volibear. Alright, Locket of the Iron Solari. It took a few days, I think, for people to realize what was going on here with this item. Yeah, so basically people just making lines and stacking lockets. And it's like the old locket stacking, except everyone's now in a line because it gives more health. Not a lot to say there. They're probably just going to cut down on the health, I would imagine. And keep the whole line thing. Alright. Okay. Music change. Anyway, Assassins being nerfed. Makes sense to me. I don't actually know. I'd have to think about it for a little bit. I'm just kind of like looking at this change and sort of talking about it and letting you guys know what's happening. I don't really know what made Assassins kind of... Well, that's the thing. They were always good. So maybe it's just a continuation of that. I don't... No, that's not true. Several Assassins individually were nerfed, or buffed rather, in the last patch. So I suppose it just pushed Assassins over the edge, like kind of a class that was already quite dominant, or now just like really shutting people down, especially early, and they don't necessarily scale poorly into the late game. So perhaps it's just a delayed buff of sorts after they were, or nerf of sorts, after they were already buffed. And nothing too complicated is going on there. No conspiracy theories or anything. However, slightly more kind of off-kilter to me is this Elementalist nerf. I don't really see what's going on there. Probably, well, it might be something to do with Kennen. Kennen is quite strong now. That would seem like it wouldn't be the issue because you could just nerf Kennen if that was the problem. Elementalists don't seem like that crazy to me at the moment. Perhaps it's because it's in conjunction with some other things, like maybe a Volibear glacial thing, but then Volibears are being nerfed. I don't know, maybe it's just a weird case of I've been in a weird spot and I haven't encountered Elementalists personally a lot, so I'm not seeing what people are doing with Elementalists that warrants this nerf here. They're getting nerfed. This is probably the thing I have the least to say about. Alright, so moving right along. Bug fixes Raptors. I read the Riot follow-up a bit. Apparently what this is sometimes Raptors don't give an item, period. I've run into this. I actually looked away at my monitor while the loot was supposed to happen when I was streaming one time. And this was during the promos, I think, actually. And I didn't hear any coins. I didn't see any items go over there because I was talking to chat. And I was like, wait a minute, did I not get an item? So that was actually a thing. It may have happened in addition, like, times aside from that. But that's the one that definitely stands out. Because I think that, like, I was in a really good spot to do well that game, and an item really would have pushed me over from coming, you know, third or whatever I did into first kind of territory. And I didn't get an item, and it really screwed me over. So that's why that one stuck out in my head so much. Similarly, Guardian Angel, I've had Guardian Angel straight up not work. It would just... The guy would not come back, or he would come back with no HP, or something weird was happening. And it was actually... It got me killed. It straight up knocked me out of the game because, you know, there was like a low number of enemies left. And I would have had an Aatrox coming back, who I was, like, basically hyper-stacking items on. And he just came back and was dead. Or didn't come back, or whatever happened. I think that happened a couple times. So that's good, because that was a really annoying bug. Redemption bug fix. Allegedly, it's healing too much. I don't know if it's healing too much all the time, or healing too much sometime. But apparently it's healing like 1,000% health, as opposed to just straight up 1,000 health. So I suppose that's good. Though, interestingly, again, I'm finding this less and less usable given the pervasiveness of red buff and stuff, so... Okay, Guardian. Apparently what the Guardian bug fix is that when Guardians die, the buff disappears. So that's kind of crappy. You know, you imagine you want the Guardians more up front because they're tougher to soak things up, and then they die and their buff disappears. that might explain, and I'm not sure because I haven't run Guardian too many times since the patch, but one of the times that really sticks out in my head is I put double Guardian buff on a Hypercarry Shyvana, and it seemed really underwhelming. Like it wasn't doing very much, and apparently it was doing nothing. Because the Guardians would die, Hypercarry Shyvana would be stuck there, and she wouldn't have that armor buff. And I was like, why is she dying so fast? So that makes sense to me now that, it's been mentioned. Because these are definitely things that have stuck out in my mind that I wasn't sure about. But yeah, there were bugs. Okay, anyway, that's it there. Some of the stuff like absolutely makes sense. Some of the stuff sort of makes sense. And some of the stuff may or may not make sense, but I don't have a personal opinion on. So all seems more or less kind of maybe in line. So I expect probably most of this stuff to roughly be going in, barring maybe some of these weird edge cases. And maybe more stuff will get added in. We'll see. Thanks for watching, guys. And of course, this will be available probably next Wednesday. So I believe that was July the 24th, yes. All right, so I'm off to stream some Teamfight Tactics myself, back into Ranked. I will see you guys around. Goodbye.